Ladies and gentlemen, we would like now to start our first keynote session in the forum, and it's going to be about entrepreneurship and supporting local content. I'd like to welcome to stage Dr. Bernard Carlson. He's a professor of humanities and the chair of the Department of Engineering and Society at the University of Virginia in Virginia, USA. Please, Doctor.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure for me to be here. This is one of the many KFUPM entrepreneurship forums I've been able to attend. I wasn't here last year, but I've been to several before that. And today I want to talk about a number of things with you, but in particular, I'm very impressed, as many people are in the West, with the Vision 2030 plan and how it represents an opportunity to improve the well-being of all the people in the kingdom. But the question in my mind, and what I want to discuss with you today, is how do we take the plan's broad goals and connect them with specific things that business and industry can do, particularly through the avenue of entrepreneurship. Now, to do that, as a keynote speaker, I always see my role as introducing a couple of big ideas, central themes that can be used to frame the conversation that we'll have today. The most important thing at a forum like this is not necessarily the content that someone like me delivers, as much as the conversations that all of you have among yourselves and with the exhibitors and everyone that's here at the forum. So what are three things that I can offer that help frame the conversation, those conversations? One is I want to talk about what do we mean by the value in the value chain. A second thing is I want to introduce an idea that comes from the founder of my university, University of Virginia, Thomas Jefferson, and his belief that society should choose the technology that supports its values. That, in other words, the values first, technology second. And then I want to spend a little bit of time with you talking about small to medium enterprises, SMEs, and how they can be used to achieve the visions of 2030, particularly connecting a vibrant society and a thriving economy. So let me talk a little bit about first the value chain and the importance of that. So all modern industries, to produce all kinds of products today, have to follow a number of steps from raw materials to the finished good. And the challenge for firms, this is traditional thinking in economics, is that firms have to figure out which steps they need to control, they need to have as part of their organization, and which steps they can outsource and not have to worry so much about. The strategic challenge, however, is for firms to figure out which are the most important steps to control. And those are most frequently the step where the greatest value is added to the good. And that's the critical question. Which are the high value added steps in the production chain or the value chain? Now, a couple of examples. Some of you may know, I'm a historian by training, though I work for an engineering school and enjoy training entrepreneurs at my university. But a couple of examples just to reinforce this idea of looking for the the step that adds the highest value. During the Industrial Revolution, England did not grow cotton for its cotton textiles. It looked to Egypt, it looked to the United States to grow the cotton. And instead, the English worried about producing the machines that could weave high-quality cotton fabrics. Now, why did they do that? Because the weaving was the high value added step in the entire chain of activities producing textiles. Similarly, in the later part of the 1800s, Andrew Carnegie, who built, a steel empire, we often talk about how he vertically integrated backwards and had railroads and ships and iron mines and coal mines, and we think that that was the power of his empire, but it actually was his close coordination and control of the steel making technology, namely the Bessemer process. Now, there is some challenges or danger in thinking about high value added steps. In certain industries and certain countries where labor is cheap, manufacturing a mass-produced good may not be the step that you want to control. It may not be where you have the highest added value. And in particular, when you look at something like the manufacture of the iPhone in China or consumer electronics generally in East Asia, you realize that, as the smiling curve illustrates, that the high value added activities are either the R&D and design at the front end of the process or the branding and the sales at the back end of the process. But a manufacturing or assembly, which is what we're talking about here today, does not necessarily have to be the bottom or the valley in the curve. We can do something about that. And there are two answers, I think, for dealing with the danger in the smiling curve, that assembly or manufacture is the lowest value step in the activity. Okay? And the first answer, I think, is we need to rethink what we mean by value. Big multinational firms using mass production techniques will almost always be able to outpace other companies by producing goods at lower costs. Okay, they can always change the technology. They can always drive their workforce harder. So if you want to challenge them in local markets to develop the manufacturing that will be important for the kingdom, I would argue you need to focus on increasing value for customers. That is to say, providing goods where the benefits of the local goods outweigh the lower price of the imported good. So the benefits have got to be better than the cost, okay? But to do so means that we have to do something that entrepreneurs are very good at, which is paying attention to customer-driven innovation. So what do I mean by customer-driven innovation? The question that I ask is, can Saudi entrepreneurs, using local resources, create products that better serve, indeed delight, the customer? And by delight, I use that word very deliberately because you want to capture not only the economic usefulness of a particular product, but you want to increase the emotional and social desirability of that product. And some of the ways to think about customer-driven innovation is that the products that you produce with local content, should solve the customer's problem better than the imported product. They do things that the customer needs to accomplish, but they do it in a much smarter way. They can be products that are semi-customizable. In other words, you're going to produce them in large quantities, but they can be adapted to the specific situations that you find in the kingdom. Customer-driven innovation can also address the needs of key segments of the population that are not being served by existing imported products. So yesterday I had the privilege of spending some time with entrepreneurial students that are finishing up the entrepreneurial leadership program here at the EI, at the Institute, and one of them talked about developing a business that would provide mobile mechanics for a new population of drivers, namely the increasing number of female drivers. And that's an example of a population that's not necessarily being served by existing products or services. And of course, we should be looking at new technologies that are sustainable, that are environmentally friendly. And one of the things that's important, impresses me about the Vision 2030 plan is its awareness of the issues of sustainability. So my point is the best entrepreneurs listen and learn from their customers and find new opportunities by learning from their customers. So that's the first answer that I have is how should we be rethinking value in this new environment of dealing with local content? The second idea that I want to bring to you comes from, again, Thomas Jefferson, a man that you may know as the father of the author of the Declaration of Independence, or third president of the United States, or the father of my university. But along with all of those things, Jefferson also thought about social and political values. As a political thinker, he was very concerned with what kind of society was America going to be. What should we think about in terms of a democratic republic? Jefferson was also fascinated by technology, and he had technology all over his home at Monticello. And there he indeed actually set up a small factory for manufacturing nails to earn some money. And he also examined and issued the first American patents, the first patents from the U.S. Patent Office. And as fascinated as Jefferson was about technology, he also warned his fellow citizens to be cautious about technology. And you might wonder, well, where was he coming from? What was he getting at? Jefferson was worried that if Americans simply imported all of the industrial technology from Britain and France, from Europe, all of the new machines for weaving cloth or steam engines or new ways of making iron and steel, that they would the Americans would inadvertently duplicate Europe's social structure. And that you would wind up having in America lots of poor workers and a small handful of rich and powerful people. And that dichotomy, that spread of wealth and power was not necessarily suited for the vision that he had of a democratic society. Instead, Jefferson advocated time and again that Americans should decide first on the values that they wanted for their new society. What kind of community do we want to live in? What kind of institutions do we want to have? And then select the technologies that reinforce those values. So the values first, what's important to a society, and then choose the technologies that will achieve that. So what values should we be thinking about as we talk about selecting local content, as framing strategies for the future for the kingdom? Okay. Now for me, all of us can read the Vision 2030 plan, see other important ideas in it, but for me, I see three key values that are inherent that we should be thinking about. One is this desire to support strong families. A second is to have meaningful, authentic, stimulating work for all of our citizens, and we want to have a sense of community that's both locally and nationally. And I would argue that there's an interplay, back and forth relationship between a vibrant society and a thriving economy. Both of those, you need to bring those two things together in order to really succeed in achieving the vision of 2030. That one feeds on the other. Now, how might we foster those values? Okay, we should seek local content technologies that combine two things. I think you have to have a few large-scale industrial operations, but at the same time, and this is the part that I really want to focus on, you need a vibrant supply network of entrepreneurs who launch small to medium enterprises. And the point is that combination should give you both technical efficiency, but also a desirable social structure. Now, it's tempting to think that my country, in America, everything looks like this picture that I put on the screen of Ford's River Rouge plant from the 1920s and 1930s. That everything in America is big and is large-scale, gigantic industrial enterprises. What we don't always pay attention to is the number of SMEs that are essential to American industry. If you look today at the data that I was most recently able to get about SMEs, the SMEs are of course companies that employ fewer than 500 workers, and in 2010 there were over 250,000 firms of that size employing nearly 5 million workers. And they can be found across a number of industries, including automobiles, plastics, furniture, metalworking, and they can consist, the SMEs, the workers in those industries consist of, the SMEs consist of 98% of all the manufacturing firms in America. Now those statistics are interesting, but this chart is probably the really important thing. And what I call attention to is the red curve that you see there. In essence, what's happened is since the 1970s, as many of you know, manufacturing as a segment of the American economy has been declining, and the number of workers overall in manufacturing has been declining. However, the one part of the manufacturing sector that has been growing is the number of employees working for small to medium-sized enterprises, which has gone up from approximately 30% to 45% since the 1970s into the 2000s. In other words, small to medium enterprises are the places where there are still the high-skilled jobs and are still a vibrant sector of the manufacturing economy. I don't need to tell this audience, but small to medium enterprises have a number of very good or key attributes. They're innovative. Small firms often generate new ideas and techniques, and they share them with each other. I'm doing now a study of the very early automobile industry, basically from 1900 to 1910. And I'm looking at both the rise of Henry Ford, but I'm also looking at the origins of General Motors. And time and again, what impresses me about the early automobile industry is the dozens, no, not even the dozens, the hundreds of small firms that populated the industry in the middle western states of America, in Michigan, in Indiana, in Illinois. Dozens of mechanics and experts developed the internal combustion engine and all of the parts and components for automobiles. It wasn't simply one giant plant. It wasn't simply Henry Ford. It was hundreds of people that shared ideas and built that industry. Small to medium enterprises are also nimble and flexible. They're able to adapt to new markets. They can take up new technology quickly. An example of this that I always like to cite is when I was studying the electrical industry in Lynn, Massachusetts in the late 1800s. I wasn't there in the late 1800s, but I was studying the industry, what it looked like in the 1890s. I mean, I'm an old guy, but I'm not that old. Is the other thing besides making electrical machinery in Lynn, Massachusetts, is it was a center for manufacturing shoes, particularly ladies' shoes. And as you know, back then and even today, fashions in shoes change very quickly. And the shoe manufacturers in Lynn had a competitive advantage because they were flexible. They could shift from one shoe style to another within weeks and had that capability. So they were nimble. Small to medium enterprises also create a variety of high-paying jobs and interesting work. They depend on, at their heart, having entrepreneurial owners and having skilled workers who can adapt, who can make those jumps from one style of shoe to another, that can figure out how to take advantage of the latest technology, in an industry like automobiles. And indeed, if you still travel across the American Midwest, every small to medium-sized town often has an automobile plant or a components plant that's producing brake linings or steering mechanisms or some part of the automobile and feeding that into Ford or General Motors or Daimler Chrysler. But the question is what can we do, either in America or in the kingdom, to stimulate and encourage more SMEs? I had the opportunity in 2013 and 2014 to work on, to be the lead scholar on a report on manufacturing. At that time, a banker and philanthropist named Howard Milstein came to my university, came to a research center there, the Miller Center, and asked if we would investigate policies that could help the American middle class. And so we conducted a study, brought together a number of experts, brought together members from both American political parties, and we issued a report which had 6 ideas. Now these 6 ideas, basically, looked at 2 things. They looked at or made recommendations about providing more information for entrepreneurs so that they can launch businesses, improve their competitive position, and made suggestions about education, particularly for the skilled workers that SMEs are going to need. Now, in the interest of time and to provide an opportunity for comments and questions from you, I'm not going to talk about all 6 of those ideas. I can touch on any one of them if you want to ask me about it, but I want to just talk about 2 of them for a few moments, the ones that are marked in red. So the first idea that I want to talk about is the notion of a nationwide supply chain map. The challenge, as shown by reports from McKinsey and others, is that big firms rely on small to medium enterprises to manufacture lots of the components that go into automobiles or go into consumer electronics or any number of products, and they're frustrated because they can't find reliable sources. In other words, small firms that can produce in the quantity and quality that the big multinationals need. At the same time, the small firms can't always identify opportunities in the supply chain that are where they can actually make their contribution, provide their high value innovation. So one idea that we proposed in the Milstein report is that either the government or private or nonprofit organizations should create detailed maps of the manufacturing supply chain so that businesses and policymakers can identify where the gaps are and how the gaps change with improvements or variations in the technology. And the benefit is particularly good for entrepreneurs and SMEs, which is they can identify new places where they can participate in the supply chain. And in talking to my colleagues at the Entrepreneurship Institute yesterday, we had a similar conversation about the importance of collecting fairly detailed data so that the local content entrepreneurs can see where the opportunities are in the kingdom, and that data is extremely crucial. So if I had one recommendation to make to you today, it's to engage a variety of people, a variety of stakeholders in collecting the data that can be used so that people can identify where are the opportunities, where are the markets for new products that are going to be built on local content. The other idea that I want to take is on the educational side. Small enterprises often find it hard to hire and retain workers with the latest skills, the skills that allow those companies to be flexible, to be nimble. And one recommendation that we made as the commission is similar to loans that are made by the Small Business Administration in the United States. There could be government-backed loans that permit small enterprises to hire workers and to train them to develop the skills that allow them to take advantage of the latest technology, the latest ideas. And my sense is, and the benefit of that is those funds help create the workforce that is absolutely vital for small enterprises and absolutely vital for making the connections between products and local content. And they were able to be targeted towards populations that you want to help in terms of creating a new and vibrant society. So in closing, let me leave you with one final idea. And that is why is it important to think about technology and the scale of companies as part of Vision 2030, okay? And that's because there are 2 different pathways that are out there for any developing economy or any industrial economy. There's a low road and a high road. So, do we choose the low road or the high road? The low road is the standard industrial story. Okay? Firms pursue profits by creating a standardized product using a combination of special purpose machinery and unskilled labor. Those firms live and die by slashing costs, by scaling up their operations and pushing their workers harder and harder. And that in that dog-eat-dog economy, there's no incentive to invest in the community in terms of training workers or cultivating good relationships with suppliers. Everyone gets squeezed wherever they can. And low-road firms are often, subject to the hazards of globalization because they are not always able to be as flexible and as nimble as we'd like them to be. Think here of what happened to Henry Ford in 1927. Ford built that factory that I showed you a few moments ago on a slide. He was producing the Model T. He was producing millions of them at ever lower costs. But at the end of the day, he wasn't able to provide a high-value good, namely an automobile in different colors, an automobile with different features that Americans wanted to buy. And as a result, he had to stop complete production of automobiles at the end of 1927, close his factories, and redesign an entirely different car, the model, what became known in 1928 as the Model A. But that stopping and starting, that rigidity, is the problem with the low road of production. In contrast, what we should be striving for is a high road of production, where companies choose to develop high-value products. Those products are based on having skilled workers who can design and manufacture them. Yes, those workers are going to command higher wages, but the higher wages are offset by a premium price and a larger market share that a customer-driven product attracts. And if they invest some of those profits in training, in R&D, high road firms can gain a significant advantage and survive over the long term. And the favorite example here is a company that I got to be involved with, which is Corning Incorporated. And Corning is an American-based company, but they produce most of the glass that you find in your laptop, your cell phone, your tablet. It's the thin but it's very strong Gorilla Glass. And they have a significant market share that they sell to Korea and Japan and to consumer electronic manufacturers in East Asia. High road or low road? Customer innovation, thinking about values first, then technology. These are ideas that I hope can inform and enrich the conversations that we'll be having today at this forum. Thank you. Yes, sir. I don't know. Yeah, here it comes. It's right behind you.
Thank you. Ali Al-Jubran, founder of Qinwan for Digital Realities. Can you give us an example of a startup, per se, that succeeded in thinking globally and acted locally from our region? In MENA, let's make it easier for you.
Okay.
That you can look up to them.
Right. So, again, yes, I mean, most of what I'm able to talk about are the sort of firms that are coming out of the Entrepreneurship Institute. And yesterday we were, talking to the companies that are able to, produce, new technologies that are going to be, have first a local application. So I was talking about a pipe cutter that is used. You're talking to, an entrepreneur who's developing a pipe cutter that can be used to basically unstuck pipes in oil wells. And I sort of said, if you make it automated and you can reduce the amount of time that companies need to solve that problem, then you can, get a local competitive advantage. But if you take that automated pipe cutter to other oil regions around the world, you're going to have to do the same customer innovation, which is to understand what are the specific problems in each oil region. So if you're going to go globally, in my opinion, it is always thinking locally. It is always adapting your product to the particular problems and opportunities in each region. In other words, we're past the world where you can produce something like the Model T and saturate the world market for automobiles with a single product. They're always going to be adapted to each locale if you want to go global. I hope that example helps.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Adil Hbeishi from Zubair Small Enterprises, Sultanate Oman, actually. I'm not from Saudi, I'm just a guest. But the question is, in the customer innovation driven, which tools or what tools you are recommending to use? Like I was thinking about design thinking as a tool, as one of the main tools to use, but is there anything else we can use it?
So, yeah, and I too am in the back of my mind thinking design thinking, but the other thing that we teach at my university is a whole set of techniques which were developed by the National Science Foundation's I-Core program called customer discovery, where and I always think customer discovery is not really the best name for the idea, which is it sounds like you're going and identifying customer segments, market segments, but what you're actually doing is discovering what are the problems and wishes that individuals have. And there's a whole set of tactics for doing that, for listening to the customer and learning what they really need.
Is there any publishing for that? Or?
Oh yes, yeah, and when we can talk, in the coffee break about where to look for information about that. One of my favorite books, and I can't think of the author right now, but the title of the book, and you can get it online, is called "How to Talk to Humans."
How to Talk to Humans.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, here comes the microphone.
Thank you so much. You referred to the SMEs expected exercise to look for local sources and the challenges ahead of the entrepreneurs to match with opportunities. What is the best method in tackling this?
So I think that again, to follow up on this talk to me the most important thing to do is to train. Is to develop an entrepreneurial mindset, and in particular, an entrepreneurial mindset is important because oftentimes, the experts in the industry or the engineers know the solution, but they don't necessarily know what's the best problem to apply their solution. So frequently, as I often say, innovators are bundles of solutions looking for problems. Now, how do you find those problems? How do you define them? Again, you need to have a flexible mindset where you're constantly matching the solution and the problem together. And to do that, you need the customer discovery that we've just been talking about. You need to be able to go out and talk and listen to people. So those are the skills and the strategies that folks need. And the entrepreneurial training often focuses on that. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Barnard. I'm sure it's a perfect start for our forum. And just as a token of appreciation, our Dean, Dr. Wael Musa, would like to thank Dr. Barnard and present for him a small gift.